I believe that almost all medication started out probably as natural substances or dietary supplements or something of the kind, and then pharmaceuticals developed from petroleum or from oil or various things are good substitutes. I'm thankful for the research that's gone into making those, but I have a feeling that lots of our medical situations could be addressed by dietary changes if we only knew and would just take care of the right things. There's some things that we just can't tolerate, and if we're diabetic, you can't tolerate the continual glucose challenges. So anyway, okay, so I'm not going to get off into that though tonight. That's not the idea. So last week, and I went ahead and added several verses into because of the questions that were asked. We were talking in. We've been following through Revelation chapter 9, and when we got down to the fifth the fifth trumpet, I guess it would be, then we went on to the sixth. But at that point, we talked about the dragon, the serpent, the devil, Satan, that had been cast to the earth, the star that had been cast to the earth. We talked about that in some detail. And then we got to the sixth. Okay, so Revelation chapter 9, verse 12, and we were looking at that. First woe was past, which was the had to do with the angel, the star that fell out of heaven. And then we talked about, beginning with verse 13, then the sixth angel sounded. I heard a voice out of the four horns of the golden altar, which is before God, one saying to the sixth angel who had the trumpet, release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. And so I've talked about the fact of how that all of these prophecies come together at one point, and that is the point where they come together. And this is going to be a earth-changing, earth-shattering series of events. Right now, you can love your life and think that you love your life, maybe, or the things of your life, but the reality is, what we are enjoying, most of the things that people think that they're enjoying, are temporary. These are going to pass, and so we need to hold on to them only to that extent of saying, you know, I realize that these things will pass. These were never meant to be held on to. And the earth as it is today, we need to hold on to very lightly as well. We don't know what the challenges are going to be, all of them, but we do know that challenges are coming. We're going to be looking at some of those. And some of them, it gets into quite a bit of detail about some very tough things. So the question was asked about this release the four angels who are bound at the great river Euphrates. So one of the things I did today, I used to be a photo interpreter for the Air Force, and so one of the things I did today was go through and just look at the Euphrates River all the way from, let's zoom out here a ways. And so you can see that the Euphrates River, that doesn't put us a marker up there, so, and I don't have a laser pointer. But if you were to look right over here, so just off of Cypress is here, if you look at that just up, almost where it's pointed toward, you'll see the beginnings of the river way up there. If I try to move that little hand that you can see up there, it'll disappear.
Is it the yellow line?
Okay, so let me do it this way. Let's see here if I can. I'm tied down, so let me see if I can get loose here. Okay, so the yellow line does follow it, but this river right here, okay, and it goes all the way down, and all the way then, almost from the mountains that between Turkey and Syria, all the way between there, all the way down to the Persian Gulf. That makes sense? So, yes, yeah. So this is all up here is Iran. I wish that I can see it on mine, but you can't see it there. Every once in a while you see the little hand pop up. But anyway, you see Iran. Let me just do it this way. So what I'll do, it comes and goes. So what I'm going to do, I'll put like Iran, so we can bring it right down, and so that you can actually see. Okay, it's still not very big, but you can see. So there's Iran. So. But between, and I guess this is what I'm trying to show, Um,
Is
and
the
that's going
Tigris
out.
not as important as the Euphrates?
No, it's not.
They
And
hardly ever talk about
Euphrates
it.
is referred to as the Great River. The Great River Euphrates. In Scripture, almost always it's referred to as the Great River Euphrates. But you can see why. Let me just do this, just to give you some idea how big it is. Um, when we in a lot of the places that come up to this lake, like this is Al Asad Lake, and then the river flows out of it. May not look like much of a river, flowing through that valley, but if you look at it closer, you can see that it is a pretty good river, and you can also see that there are not lots of bridges across it. Um, so it's a natural boundary that stretches. Now, see, there will be a bridge there. Let's look at this one. So I didn't want it to get as large as it would get, so I'm going to. And you can see that this one's been blown away, or that you see that all of the, what do you call them? Spans, have been collapsed into the water. And all along it, that's the case. So you can see that the road's good on either side, but the spans have been collapsed into the water. But it's a pretty good sized river, as you can see. There's another bridge there. And you can see that there's one span apparently missing out of it.
How long has it been since it was blown apart?
Well, I don't know however long the fighting's been going on over there, and it's been going on for a long time. Anyway, if you get down close enough, when you get down close enough, you can see the boats and stuff on it. You can see that it's a good-sized river, right? Okay, see, like there's the boats on it. So, and those are not little boats. Well, they're more like barges. Yeah, they're see, that's container barges. Probably is what it is. Okay, so I'm gonna. So it's a great river, and that's the river. That's not the lake. Now up above it, Al Asad Lake, you can see it's a big lake. Okay, and now there was a time when that water was shut off right here for a period of time, but you can see why that you can't shut it off very long. See, here's the dam, okay, and you can see that there's not much water going over the spillway, but more than likely the generators and stuff. And then there's another set of another dam down at the bottom here. So you see it's dammed up in more than one spot. If I can find the other one, you'll see that it'll take me a second. Anyway, I'm not going to go too far into that, but I just wanted you to get an idea of because of the questions that were asked, you think of a river. When we think of a river, what we're probably thinking of is a stream. In fact, we don't have any rivers. So now look at this dam. See, okay, so here's another dam. Doesn't look like too big a deal, but when you get closer to it, you can see that it's a lot bigger dam than you realize. See, it's a fairly good-sized lake. See the spillway and the water going over it and stuff like that. Okay, so the question was asked about that, and so I thought, well, I'm going to look it up and just kind of give us an idea. So you can see there how the river flows, and it starts way up here in the mountains, actually. See, way up here in the mountains, goes way back up into Turkey and into the mountains in Turkey, and then goes all the way out to the Persian Gulf.
Well, you can see how it would be a natural barrier.
Right. So the kings of the East, like, see, if we were to come over here to the kings of the East, so we know that there are 4 kings over here. So let's see if I can figure that. Okay, so this is India. They say that it's not New Delhi anymore, it's just Delhi, but there's Delhi and New Delhi, so we'll still keep it that way. But India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, we're trying to work out something there now. And then you come on down to Iran. This is all Iran. And then that Lake Van was where we were looking at, where it circles around, goes all the way back up to there. The Euphrates River, all the way down to the Persian Gulf. But you can see that for anything over here in India, and India probably maybe where one of the four kings are, or up here into China, that there's Tibet. But all of that you can see, these are all to the east, in other words. Makes sense? So it's a natural boundary that goes across there.
So where are the four angels?
The four angels, where are they?
Yeah, I mean, it said down at the river Euphrates.
Well, angels mean messengers, so it could mean, but and there's a place where it talks about three spirits like frogs that come out of the. So I don't know that that has anything to do with it or not, or if it's talking. I don't know where they are. It just says, but bound in the sense that they can't move forward to do what they are wanting to do is the way I would take that, rather than that they're actually bound there as far as, you know, well, or a geographic constraint. The Euphrates River is a geographic constraint for them to pull across. I want you to think about something. So, how do you move 200 million men? Okay, do you move them in trucks? Do you move them in planes? How many plane loads or how many truck loads or how many train loads would it take to move 200 million men? How many would it take to move 1,000? How many would it take to move 10,000, 100,000? You know, and so we're talking about 200 million. There's only one way you move 200. Yeah.
They were already destroyed.
Yeah, so how do you move 200 million men? There's only one way to move them. That is by foot. Okay, infantry. And the only way to move a large mass of men like that is infantry. You have to march them. They have to march. Well, they have to have food. They have to have provision, all that. Now, they'll get a lot of that from the places where they are. But you come to a river like this, how many bridges, boats, or other ways do you have to get across a river like that? And I'm not talking about a static river. I'm talking about a flowing river. The only place it's static is where it's a dam, and then behind that is a big lake. You know, so you could dam it off for a period of time. How long does it take to cross 1,000 men? Say you blocked off the river. How long would it take to march 1,000 men across that dry riverbed after you got it dried? How long would it take to march 10,000, 100,000, a million, 100 million, 200 million? You get the idea?
But it said the water was dried up.
It will be dried up. So that's a supernatural event. Okay, and so I think when we get, I may just skip ahead just a little ways and go ahead to Isaiah chapter 24, just to get some idea, because we can talk about this and we will talk about it from time to time. But let me do that just so you'll see why that it's like it is. So let's go to Isaiah chapter 24, verse 1, if you want to. Okay. Now here's the thing. So when we come to the breaking of the second seal, you remember the first seal, he said he broke the first seal, rider on the white horse came forth going forth, conquering and to conquer. And then it said he broke the second seal, and the rider on the red horse comes forth, and he's given a great weapon with which to take peace from the earth. It's at that time, as the rider on the red horse is coming to take peace from the earth, that the armies of Turkey and did I not get that plugged in good, or did it unplug?
It wasn't plugged in here. I'm sorry.
Okay. So the armies of Turkey, of Iran, and Russia will all be coming against Israel. When that's happening, and as they're coming against Israel, they're coming out of the north as well. But that's not that large an army. I mean, how large an army? It's going to be the largest one that's been brought together up until that time. It's going to be a large army, but not 100 million, not a million, not in the millions, but probably more in the range of maybe if in the hundreds of thousands, that would probably be pushing it. In other words, it might be a few 100,000 that will gather, but they will all fit together on the mountains of Israel. How many million men could you put on the mountains of Israel? So think about that for a little bit. So the mountains of Israel. Israel is a little bitty place down here. You can see it here that it is, not counting the West Bank, which is surrounded by red. You see Israel. There's Tel Aviv, Haifa. Does that show up there? You see what I'm getting at? So Israel's a small place. The mount, yeah, it's like, yeah, you're talking about like this would be Lee County right along this edge here, from between the red and the Mediterranean Sea. You could see to the west. You could see that it's not a big place. Okay, so here's the mountains of Israel. The mountains of Israel, how big are they? How many million men? If I go down close enough, it may look like that's a big place. But if you'll look, compared to these nations around it, how big is Israel? It's a little place, right? It's just a little place. So could you put 1 million men, say, on this army? Now, if we were going to look at that, what we would want to see is that from Haifa, that may not show up there, but you see Haifa there where the little hand shows up every once in a while, and you can see that valley coming all the way down, coming down to the Sea of Galilee. Does that make sense? Okay. Haifa, Haifa. Yeah, it's Haifa. So, like.
So Haifa and Tel Aviv are still.
Yes, yeah. And so this is where I think probably Haifa. This is the port of Haifa, and it may be referred to in Isaiah chapter 17 as the fortified city of Ephraim. I'm not sure that it is, but I think that it may be. So you can see that it's a pretty good sized city, and it's a port city, as you can see. You see here? Very important city.
What's the population
Of Israel? I don't know that. Alexa, what's the population of Israel?
Person. According to the CIA World Factbook, as of 2017, the population of Israel is 8.3 million people.
Okay, 8.3 million people. So you can get the idea, though, right? Pretty easily, can you not? That you couldn't put 100 million or a million.
10 times what's
the
there.
population of the country. Yeah, so you can see that when the Northern Army comes down, this is not the Eastern Army, when the Northern Army is there, they will be destroyed. I was showing you Haifa. So from Haifa, going south along this valley, you'll see, this is where I think that what the deal will be, to what I think will happen, is that when the ships of Cyprus, which Cyprus is right up here, that's where the British have their navy. The United States, once the United States is not able to help, then it'll be the British Navy that will be the main force of the NATO response. They are stationed here in Cyprus. Okay, Russia will be trying to get their troops out of there. I think by then they will realize that the handwriting is against them, and so they will be. I believe that they will be right here. I believe that they will be they're going to try to take their troops out through Haifa, which is right there. So their troops will be in this valley. Okay, that the valley, and it will block. There will be so many soldiers in that when they bury them there in this valley, it will block from the east to the west all the way. It'll come right down this valley to, if you follow it down, and I've done this without making it smaller, but I'm going to do it smaller just so you can see, all the way down till it reaches the Nile River and the Sea of Galilee. Okay, so anyway, so that's the valley between Haifa. Okay, between Haifa and
Is the real dark the valley?
the valley is this valley right here. I don't know if that's let me look and see what it is. It's trees. So there's forest all along that road. Okay, and then there's the valley. See, that's what and I'm just doing that just by what I read and then saying, okay, it looks to me like that. That's what the deal is. So there'll be a burying place here, and this I believe will be the burying place of Gog. Will be in this valley. Okay, and it'll block the passage from the east to the west. Okay, right, probably right across there, which you probably cannot see that. Okay, but when it happens, so several things are going to happen, and we've read about those, about that there will be rain and fire and brimstone that will fall on the armies that are gathered on the mountain of Israel. So rain will come from where? And the fire and brimstone will come from where? And it seems to me that probably there will be something like a large ball of ice. It's probably on its way now. That probably is circling out here somewhere, and at the right time, it will miraculously, actually by God's design, it's going to come into the Earth's atmosphere. And when it does, so there's several things are going to happen. There is going to be rain on the mountains. It says there's rain on the mountain on the day that the towers fall. So that's one of the statements that it makes. And there will be fire and brimstone will fall along with the rain. So can you imagine rain falling out of the sky, water falling out of the sky, but fire and brimstone along with it? Why is that? Ice, the ice doesn't burn up; it just melts. So it will be coming down like rain, and of course there'll be evaporation and all of that. So it will not be. I'm not talking about boiling water necessarily, but the rock and all will still be molten, and the sulfur will still be. Okay, but when it hits, apparently it will hit the earth, and it will hit the earth with enough impact that it will break so that part of the earth will probably fly out the other side. So part of it will hit. There will be a worldwide earthquake followed by, but there will also be the ejection, maybe out of the, before when it hit in the Gulf of Mexico, that theory is that a piece flew out from what's now the Pacific. And so, but if one hit, so that I don't know exactly where it would hit, but it will open up. It'll open up the deep places of the earth. Okay, and so there are other places which we were just reading about. It talks about a star that falls from heaven, but it said he was given a key to the bottomless pit. He had a key to the bottomless pit. He opened up the bottomless pit, and the scorpions come out upon the earth, and it describes them. I went ahead and I was going to read to you the rest of the things that happened because of those scorpions. Anyway, how that they kill a third of humanity. But I decided to skip that for tonight. I was adding that. We'll probably, as I often do, jump back and pick up some of that later. But I really wanted us to look at this part. So here's what the earth looks like after that. So what does the earth look like after that? That's what this description is. I think best thing to do is just let the Bible just describe it itself rather than me describe it. What will happen? What will it look like? For one thing, though, I want us to realize that as bad as it's going to be, for the people that are still left alive, they will still be scrambling to stay alive. They'll be scrambling for food and water and scrambling for health, and they will be fighting with each other until the point that there won't be lots of men left alive. Most of the men will die because of the fact that men fight other men. If you get, if you have a scarcity of that type, what's going to happen? The men will fight each other over whatever there is, every little scrap of everything. And so there'll be very few men left at that time. And so I won't get into those passages, but that's, that there'll be, in other words, apparently there'll be many more women left than there will be men when that time comes, working through that. Okay, let's just look at Isaiah chapter 24, verse 1, though. We've looked at this before, but it's been a while, and I think it might be wise now for us to look at it in this context with what we've been looking at. Behold, the Lord lays the earth waste, devastates it, distorts its surface, and scatters its inhabitants. So the nations are going to be broken up, and there's so many pieces of that all fit together, but the nations will not be the nations that we know today. So the national borders and boundaries will cease to exist. So there will be new regions set up with 10 regions with 10 kings over all of those, and trying to bring about a world government on this distorted, twisted, broken situation that's left. And so you'd say, well, who wants to live during that period of time? I just want to just die. But the reality is, you may think that now, but it's like people that say, you know what, I don't want to live to be a certain age. You know what I didn't do? Thinking of that reminds me that my mom doesn't know that I didn't call her, but she can hear that I'm in here teaching, so she's bound to know. She said, you forgot me, didn't you? Which I did. It can happen. You'll never do anything like that. So anyway, sorry about that. Okay, so anyway, a lot of people think, well, you know, I don't want, if I was in bad health or if certain circumstances, I just wouldn't want to live. I just want to just lay down somewhere and die. But you might find that's different. I've found that a lot of times when people get to the point that it gets close to that, they start scrambling. God has placed within us a very strong desire to live as long as we can and to try to survive. And so people will do that. And so you might look at this and say, I wouldn't want to live in that world. But the reality is, if you were in that world, you'd be struggling just like everybody else would be to survive. And yet at the very same time, you're comfortable in the knowledge that if you were, when you die, that you'll go to be with Christ and that your struggle will be over. But it doesn't give you a license to not struggle, because the struggle needs to necessarily go on. Let's see here. You need to do that, and the world needs you. It's just like we as a church need each other. Isn't that right? So God, you know, He placed within the church various giftings. What gifting did He give more than any other one? I think the gift of help. So He lists all those that list. And there are many things, and maybe not all are prophets, pastors, teachers, you know, different types of workers, or with gifts of tongues or interpretation or whatever it might be, of knowledge, whatever what might be. But there are many people who have the gift of helps, and so anyway, but it said the Lord lays the earth waste, devastates it, distorts its surface, scatters its inhabitants. The people will be like the priest, the servant like his master, the maid like her mistress, the buyer like the seller, the lender like the borrower, and the creditor like the debtor. You might think, well, there's still going to be, you know, I've got all this wealth, I should be able to buy food and buy water and do this stuff. The reality is, the silver and gold people will throw out in the streets. In fact, it said it'll be like rust against them. They'll throw the things that they valued away and consider them as worthless at that time, and we will all be equal on that basis. The earth will be completely laid waste and completely despoiled, for the Lord has spoken this word. Now, you might think, okay, there's no place left alive, but it makes it clear there will be people still alive. In other words, during this time, yes, a lot of people will die, and there will be a lot of, and people will continue to die during that period of time. That's just a reality. Death has always been a reality, and many will be. But as long as there are people left alive, do they need somebody to tell them about the love of God and about Christ, and that there is a hope and salvation? There's something beyond this. Don't they still need somebody to tell them under every circumstance? And the darker the conditions, isn't it more needful to have the light in the dark situations than the light? I mean, it's a wonderful thing. We got saved, you know, during the time of the Crusades, when there were worldwide crusades. And I thank God for all of the things that went on in those days. Yes, there were some dark days, some dark things in the 60s and 70s and stuff like that. But the reality is, it was the brightest days for the church. You know, the gospel was preached into all the world for a witness. The Bible's translated into all of these languages. All these missionary movements, you know, started so many, so that there were churches on all these corners. And that's a wonderful time. But was your light, if your light is small especially, was it more needful then or in the dark? As the world's growing darker and darker and darker, is it more needful today than it was then. And I'm saying, no matter what our circumstance, yes, we may not have been Billy Graham back in the day. We may never have had a mass following, and we never will. But the reality is that in the darkness, one person's light can bring a light to anyone that they come in contact with. You come into somebody's life, and you can be that light. That makes sense? And so that's what we're trying, the reason I think we need to look at this. As long as mankind is on the earth until Jesus comes, we need to be doing the work that he gave us to do, fulfilling our commission. And so that's the point. So yes, the earth itself is going to bear the penalty that's upon it. If just the United States bore the penalty that's upon it because of the sin that the nations committed, I'm not talking about individually we were saved, and God spared us from much of the consequences of our actions. But the reality is the nation's consequence has to come in time. So it's got to be paid for. Bloodshed has got to be paid for. All of those sins that a nation commits have to be paid for. Now, nations, many times, there's been granted a reprieve, there's been granted repentance, and a generation will be saved, and the penalty will be put off. Nevertheless, if you'll look, in every instance, the time finally came when the price had to be paid. Bloodshed has to be paid for. In fact, he says that when you get to the 26th chapter, which we won't get that far tonight, very obviously. But the earth mourns and withers, the world fades and withers, the exalted of the people of the earth fade away. And then it tells why. Why is all of that? Verse 5, Isaiah 24:5. The earth is also polluted by its inhabitants. Is that true? I mean, that's just a reality. The earth is polluted. And you might say, well, I'm not I don't know what you would call it, a conservationist or ecologist or whatever. I'm not asking that. I'm just saying, though, we've got to realize that there are certain laws that God placed into being that have consequences. So the laws that God gave, they weren't given to be restricting us from having fun or from being wealthy or all those things. What were their purposes? Those laws were to protect us, basically. And so the earth is polluted by its inhabitants. They transgressed laws. They violated statutes. They broke the everlasting covenant. All of those are charges that are leveled against humanity, leveled against the earth. Does that make sense? Right. Okay, so then you see in verse 6, therefore. Okay, that's what they did. Therefore, a curse devours the earth. So he says, the earth, yes, the earth is broken. It's had a chunk knocked out of it. It's distorted. It's earthquake, fire, warfare, famine, plague. All of these things have happened. But whose fault is it? Why are you going to blame God for it? Say, God, how could you do this? The reality is, he says that it's because of what they did that they violated the. I'm going to have to cut all of that out.
Yeah. We're going to have to start having him set over
Yeah,
here.
we're going to have to make sure that we understand that, because I'm going to have to, if I don't remember and cut that out, it'll be on the video when it's put on. Okay. But the earth, therefore curse devours the earth, and those who live in it are held guilty. Therefore the inhabitants of the earth are burned, and few men are left. Okay, so that's where I get the idea. Few men are left. One of the places, and by the way, it's not the only place, but it's one of those. But whose fault is it that a curse devours the earth? Who brought the curse upon the earth? It's a conditional thing. So God brought about the covenant, the laws, the statutes, all of that. Yeah, and it was because of that that the curse devours the earth. That those who live in it are held guilty, and that the inhabitants of the earth are burned. Does that mean all the inhabitants of the earth are burned? No. We're talking about a third of the inhabitants. In one place, it's a third, and in fact, if I'd have gone farther in both places, when we get to the sixth event, it's in both places it talks about a third of humanity being killed. So that's not, I mean, in other words, there's more people left alive than killed by those things. Although by flame, sword, captivity, and plunder, well, by wild beasts of the earth, by famine, plague, and pestilence, a fourth of humanity will be killed by those things. So, but you can see, can't you, that between all of those things, that humanity is going to get to the place that there's not going to be that many left. And those that are left are going to go back to trying to learn how to do what I would call subsistence farming, trying to find a way just to get by, living, working from daylight till dark, to try to just to make a living. And for some people, it probably is not going to be bad at all, and for some people, it's going to be terrible. But in spite of what some people believe, farming is not as easy as digging a hole in the ground, putting a little corn in the ground, and covering it up with dirt and putting water on it. Farming, you've got to know what day to put the corn in the ground in order to have a long enough season, because otherwise you can have a real nice looking stand of corn when it freezes, but without getting an ear of corn off of it. You've got to know when to put it in. Yes.
So during those days, us black thumbs will need to be really good friends with
Green thumbs. Yeah, the black thumbs need to be friends with the green thumbs, and we'll make friends. And people will be trying to. There are people that have insight or wisdom or understanding or one way or another that the understanding can get out. Although I do believe that a lot of places in first world countries are going to be severely hurt because of the fact that they don't know how to do water, food, or anything else. Don't know how to do anything anymore except, I mean, that's just a reality. We're just a generation away from it. Our parents, our grandparents do all of these things. We don't know how to do. We don't know how to make soap out of ashes out of a fireplace, and to turn it in with that and fat. You can turn it into lye, which you can use to make soap, lye soap. But who knows how to do it, in this day and age. But my grandmother would have, that's how they, like our parents, my parents at least, were brought up with that bars of soap that were made out of the lard from the hogs that had been acted on by the ashes. Well, very obviously, we either got a late start or I got slow off of the go. But the curse devours the earth, and so I'll just stop there where it says few men are left. And yet they will still be left alive and will be having a lot of the same motivations and all that they do even today. We'll look at more at the rest of that. But you can read Isaiah 24, 25, 26. Okay. Pastor Juan, would you dismiss us with prayer, please, sir?
Gracious Heavenly Father, we do thank you once again, Lord. Thank you for your word. Thank you for bringing us together, Lord, and for the insight that you've given us tonight, Lord. Continue to be guiding us throughout the rest of the day, the week, Lord, and help us, Lord, to be attentive more and more to your word, Lord. And
Yes.
do your perfect will, Father God. Once again, thank you, Father God.